But then what happened was in 2018, 2019, and 2020, 5 quality manuscripts came out in very good journals from groups that were studying eye movements, not studying stress or trauma, that found that these lateralized eye movements, not up and down, but lateralized eye movements, quiet the activity of the amygdala, the limbic structure in the brain that's primarily responsible for threat detection and stress. I fundamentally disagree respectfully though, with the idea that we can't recover sleep that we've lost. Because what are we really talking about there? For me, it's the ability to perform these duration path outcome analyses. So in my lab, we have people do a cognitive task, and then we place them into these very deep states of relaxation through things that are kind of like Yoga Nidra. And people can find Yoga Nidra scripts out there. They're everywhere on YouTube, elsewhere. Or we have them do a hypnosis script. Hypnosis is very similar. Deep relaxation, wandering sort of attention, fairly narrow context, but it brings the brain into these unique states where you're neither asleep nor awake. And for people that have trouble falling asleep or trouble relaxing themselves, these kinds of practices are extremely useful because they're really teaching you how to turn off those modes of focus. So, you know, we live in a stressed society. Some people are stressed because they're overwhelmed, but other people are stressed because they just don't know how to turn off their brain and fall asleep. And so if you want to learn how to turn off your brain and fall asleep, these practices are immensely useful.
How do you practice hypnosis by yourself, though?
So there's some scripts. I would recommend people go to one of the scripts on YouTube, or there's some good ones. I've never met him. I don't have any relationship to him, but Michael Sealey, Sealey, Australian guy, has some really good hypnosis scripts.
And they're just audio programs?
Yeah, you just listen to them. And these
and he's not going to make you walk off a cliff or anything?
No. So stage hypnosis is very different. So I have a very close collaboration with a guy named David Spiegel, who's in our psychiatry department at Stanford. We're now looking at how daily breathing exercises can impact people's sleep and levels of stress. He's done a lot of work on addiction and trauma and pain management through hypnosis. And most all of hypnosis that's clinical involves bringing one's state into one of deeper relaxation, not full sleep, and then thinking about some behavioral change that one wants to make. These are ancient practices, really, and I think that they were developed by people that understood that rewiring of the brain requires focus and deep rest. What's interesting about hypnosis is it brings those two things together at the same moment. So normally you'll work really hard on something, then you'll sleep, and that's when the plasticity occurs. But hypnosis likely accelerates that whole process by having people enter a state of deep relaxation and focus at the same time, and allows those circuits to reshape themselves. And there's some published data from David's lab to support that.
That's fascinating.
So I think these practices are really useful. And I think that if you want to get better at performing, everyone now knows, thanks to Matt Walker's book and others, like sleep more, sleep better. But what if you have trouble sleeping? Well, or falling asleep? Well, we want to define what that is. Some people have a hard time turning off their thoughts. It's really hard. Remember, you can't do it. What you can do is to learn to control that perceptual window and distribute it so that your sense of time starts to kind of drift off and you end up in sleep more easily. And it's a practice that most people find if they do it for 10 minutes a day or so, they start sleeping much better within a week or more, you know, and sometimes more. Sometimes people need some other help, like not drinking caffeine late in the day, et cetera. But that brain state of no duration path and outcome analysis is going to be the most restorative, and you can get it in wakefulness too. So taking a walk where you're just letting your mind go is very powerful. And the other thing that's powerful is optic flow. So self-generated optic flow by walking, running, or cycling shifts the brain into a state of relaxation that's not seen when you're stationary. This is well described in the neuroscience literature. For some reason, it's not well described in the wellness literature, but it's a real thing. When you move through space, you're active, there's a natural calming of the brain circuits involved in threat and threat detection. This is the basis for EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. The lateralized eye movements they have people do in the clinic, that kind of goofy looking thing while they recount
I've heard you
trauma.
Talk about that to overcome fear and trauma.
That lowers stress, and the rationale is that by coupling a low stress state to the recall of the trauma, it's going to allow people to reshape their relationship to the trauma, to tolerate the discomfort. And EMDR, my clinical colleagues tell me, works best for fairly well-defined traumas, it's not going to be like my childhood or, a whole series of events, but for single event traumas or a trauma that's repeated but of the same sort, it seems to work best. It's not going to work best to completely reshape all relationships to all traumas. My lab studies vision, and we study stress and states of mind. And people used to talk to me about EMDR and ask me about EMDR, and I was like, this is crazy. This
sounds like a music genre.
This is absurd, right?
Or a drug.
Makes no sense. Why would moving the eyes from side to side have any impact on states of mind? That's ridiculous. But then what happened was in 2018, 2019, and 2020, 5 quality manuscripts came out in very good journals from groups that were studying eye movements, not studying stress or trauma, that found that these lateralized eye movements, not up and down, but lateralized eye movements, quiet the activity of the amygdala, the limbic structure in the brain that's primarily responsible for threat detection and stress. And I was like, oh my goodness, this thing might actually be real. Then I started to dig into the backstory of this. And there was a woman named Francine Shapiro who came up with this idea, actually walking behind Stanford in the Stanford Hills. She was a therapist, and she figured she had this idea based on the fact that she didn't feel as upset about certain things when she was walking, that this might be useful. And she was smart enough to know that these lateralized eye movements are what reflexively occur anytime we're in optic flow. We don't realize it because they're subconsciously generated and they're very subtle. But she realized she couldn't really take people walking on their therapy sessions. I suppose she could, but it's not really practical. It's raining, etc. So what she decided to do was to bring the eye movement component to the clinic and had them move their eyes from side to side while they would recount these traumas. And people experienced tremendous benefit. And in fact, now there's a lot of evidence to show that these lateralized eye movements really do quiet the stress of the nervous system and allow people to continue to move forward. This is probably all anchored. I go back to that story of that deer that needs something. And as it's feeling that agitation and gets up and starts moving, the movement feeds back onto the brain to quiet that stress and anxiety so it can be observant of its environment. And that panoramic mode is what we are in when we are in a position to be very situationally aware. When we're stressed, we're going to have soda straw view of the world.
Right, on one thing.
This relates directly to addiction, because I've spent some time at addiction treatment clinics and talking to people in that community. And it's very clear that, of course, there are a huge number of factors that play into why people become addicted and relapse, et cetera. But if you can get at people's ability to control their anxiety and their feelings of peak states and happiness, you don't guarantee, but you help reinforce the possibility that they're going to get sober and stay sober. As an addict gets more tethered to the idea that some substance is the thing they need, the progressive narrowing of the things that bring them pleasure, and everything else kind of falls away like portrait mode on the phone. They're essentially in a state of high stress trying to meet that dopamine need all the time, and they don't see other possibilities. The reason I mention not just stress and treating stress to get at addiction, but also pleasure, is that we've also seen this. When do people relapse? When they're feeling really good. When they're feeling really lousy and stressed, and when they're feeling really good.
Yeah.
They've been sober for 5 years. We hear about this in the news, usually from celebrity examples. People have been doing great. All of a sudden, they're back in treatment. And you're like, what happened? Well, what happened was the dopamine circuit from other things, maybe a great life event or things are going well, or stress, the loss of a job, everything crashing, puts our visual system and the rest of our brain into a myopia. We literally become nearsighted, and the dopamine system says, that's the only thing that's going to get me out of the mode that I'm in. They literally don't see the other possibilities. So some of the work that I'm starting to get involved in now is to try and inform the addiction treatment community, the trauma community, that there are ways to use action in the body to move people out of states of myopia, nearsightedness.
Thanks for watching. If you found this information helpful, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more health and wellness tips.